So I hope you guys really get a lot out of this. I'm looking forward to learning all the details. And please welcome Philp St Baker.
Well, thanks, Jared, for that introduction. And look, I was a little bit taken back when Jared approached me for this. I don't do a lot of public speaking. I'm mainly, like you guys, busy creating businesses, not talking about what I'm doing. So, and he said, I want you to talk about vertical integration. And he put that topic to me. And I was taken back a little bit. And when I thought about it, I could understand why he probably asked me to do that, because actually most of all the businesses I've been involved in, vertical integration or exploiting opportunities within the supply chain has been ever present and continues to be in nearly all of the businesses that I've been involved in. So very observant Jared sitting back there going, he does a lot of that, I'm going to get him to talk about it. So he's forced me to do it. But he also told me the good thing about this thing is the people here just want to hear your story and they'll pick up whatever learnings they can take away from it. And it's a great opportunity just to share and give back to other entrepreneurs. And it's also a local story. So I'm a Brisbane person, so it's nice to share with people locally in Brisbane as well about a local success story. And in my case, there's a couple of different stories. There's the EO Power story and the Novonic story. So I'll focus on those two business journeys. One was 8 years, as Jared said, and the other one more recently is 5 years. So I'll take you through just a little bit of the evolution of those businesses. And in that, I think you'll see how the vertical integration comes into it and why and how, and also what parts of it didn't work. Because not all of it was a great success, some of it was a dismal failure, but thankfully a lot of it was a great success. So there's a real mix there, and I'll be able to sort of give you a little bit of insight into why I think some of it worked and some of it didn't work. So just with that, I'll kick off and just run through the two stories and try to maybe draw some common themes and do a bit of Q&A at the end and see where we get to. So I'm going to talk about EO Power first. So this was a business started by my father, right? So I didn't found it, like a lot of you have founders here. This is founded by my father. I was busy working with BHP, with Jared and others in the mining industry and the refining industry. But my father started an energy consulting business, and in the 1990s, Australia deregulated the electricity sector and allowed private sector to participate in the sector rather than just governments running it. So he transitioned from being a consulting firm into a private power developer, starting with small power projects. So in about late 1990s, he managed to pull together a consortium and bid and won a power project opportunity to supply power, build a power station and supply power to the state government. In this case, the large contract was with Energex. Right, so it was really a new world where private sector were coming into this world dominated by the government, essentially. And he had a financial partner because he was a small consulting business, didn't have a lot of financial capability, so he had a financial partner and he had a small interest in this business. So they built this power station, they had a good contract with the government, and it ran very smoothly for a while. So that got them going out of consulting into power development. Right, so he said, okay, this has gone all right. Now I want to do a bigger power project. So he had to wait about five or 6 years before that opportunity came along. And in 2005, he banked his second big power project. And this is a power project out on the Darling Downs. It was a big gas-fired power station. It was 450 megawatts with a 150 kilometre gas pipeline connecting it to the gas supply. And again, it was a contract to the government. In this case, it was Energex. Again, it was a power offtake agreement to Energex. So, and he and his financial partner, none of them had experience with big industrial type projects before. And that was my background, working with BHP, with big industrial businesses. So my father asked me to come along and help him run this company to build these projects, to set up operating teams to operate the power stations, and then to repeat it. Hopefully we do it well, we can do more of them. So that was why I joined him. I brought my skill sets to it and that background of experience, and we essentially built that project on the Darling Downs, and we got that business going. We established a construction division, we established an operating division, we had to establish a trading division because not all the power was sold to the government. We actually had to trade in the market, which was a whole new area, and we did that very well. So what we did is we ended up, because we built that capability, we ended up duplicating that around the country. And we ended up building 6 big power projects like this in 5 years. So we built 5% of Australia's power generation in 5 years. So my father, he's a great entrepreneur. He had a lot of these ideas and projects, and I just helped him bring, I guess, the team together to execute and move forward with that. So essentially we got really good at building power stations and pipelines and getting them operating them. So we just did that and expanded across Australia. So that's not so much vertical integration, but that's doing what you do well and going as far as you can within the markets that you can. So the vertical integration sits right beside that. So and with the vertical integration and what caused that, I'll take you back to the Queensland story. So I'll just put you in the mindset of what we're doing. So in the supply chain, you've got fuel in the ground, it's either coal or gas or whatever. It goes to the power station where it gets converted to electricity. Then it's sold to the wholesale, usually a big retail company that sells it to the end user. So we're just this one piece. We built the power station and a bit of pipeline. So we didn't own the fuel and we didn't own the wholesale market or the end customer. We just did that bit. Anyway, so what happened is we were getting ready to build our second big project in Queensland, and our customer, which was the government, they were a monopoly, right? So they controlled the whole market, and they wanted to make sure we didn't charge them too much for the next power station. So they created another project across the road from us, exactly like our project, and said, well, you better give us a really good price or we'll just do it ourselves. We'll move downstream, or upstream rather, into your space, right? So and they actually called it Across the Road. That was the name of the project, across the road from us. So it's the Queensland government competing against us. Shit, what are we going to do? So it was pretty tough. Anyway, and then the other part was that they were also looking at selling their retail business and generation arms to the private sector. So we had the southern companies that had deregulated and privatised. So you had big companies like Origin and AGL coming to Queensland to buy the retail business off Energex, right? So that was a bigger problem because not only were Energex building across the road, they're going to sell it to the private sector who really would be ruthless. I mean, the government's pretty ruthless, but they're going to be even more ruthless. But then the other problem is they own the fuel as well. So they're right involved with the fuel. So now I've got my customer is now not on one side, he's now on both sides of me. So I feel the big Malachi crunch coming here. It's not looking good. So we really basically saw this as a zero-sum game. We're going to be squeezed into a situation where our margins were horribly thin and we were expected to take on really heavy risk. And it's really going to be an ugly business. So not wanting to live in that world, we quickly sort of mobilised our business, said, right, what are we going to do? Said, well, the only way to attack this is to do what they're doing, is we're going to go right over the top of our customer and go and sell our next power station to their biggest customer in Queensland. So we're going to take them out of the equation. And on the fuel supply side, we're going to go find our own oil and gas, or our own gas in this case. We're going to do exploration and put our foot on our own territory and become an explorer. So we'll take them out of there and we'll take them out of there. So I was fairly bold. But there was a couple of really important X factors that came into it for us. One was that we were actually really good at building big power stations. So we were in a unique situation, and there wasn't many people in Australia that could do that, where we could go to the biggest electricity customer in Queensland and say, you don't have to buy from them anymore, we'll deliver it for you, and we'll back it with our own power station, which we'll build to back it up. And we're really good at building, we've built 6. So you can rely on us to actually be a real alternative to being stuck with buying from the government, right? That you've done for the last however. And the customers really liked this because they really were not happy with their supply. They were not looked after, and that's typical of a monopoly. Right? I think the power companies were hated even more than the banks. So, but when they do the customer surveys, they are atrocious. I mean, you can look at every category, they're like below 50% in satisfaction levels and nearly everything. So we had this dynamic where they really wanted a change, they really wanted an alternative, and now a company stepped up and is able to offer that. So there's a couple of big X factors that needed to be in place for us to have a shot at getting one of these customers and getting going with a retail business. So we did. So our first customer is one of the biggest consumers of power in the state of Queensland. That's our first customer, right? So fortunately, we had a big power station we were building on the Darling Downs, and we said, see that beautiful new power station? One of those units is backing up my contract for you. So it worked out really nicely. So anyway, we got going with that. So that was dealing with the problem here in Queensland, but that problem was repeating itself right across Australia, in New South Wales, in Victoria, and even in Western Australia where we're operating. So we started retailing and going straight over to the end user in all of those jurisdictions. And look, we started this green retailer from zero, and it grew. By the time I left after 7 years of doing this business, we had a turnover of nearly $2.5 billion. And we had 20% of the entire market. So there was a real yearning for a new change, and we picked up on that and we went after it. So look, and the part that didn't work was the other side, the gas. That one was a little bit big to chew, that one. So we did go into gas exploration into New South Wales and Western Australia, starting small, trying to find gas located underground near where we want to build power stations. Right, so it was all linked to building power stations to supply power. But what happened is after the first 5 years of that business, the entire industry changed and demand for new power stations almost evaporated. So here I was starting in 2005, we built 5% of Australia's capacity, 6 power stations, bang, done, and then the market just stopped. And there's a couple of big factors there. One of them was GFC. The other one was with a very heavy new investment into renewables, whole renewable scheme, and energy efficiency was really getting implemented, starting to be implemented. So consumers were actually being more efficient. They were putting LED lights in, not the old halogens. So the requirements were dropping. So there was no need to build more power stations. And what we were really good at? Building power stations. So that was pretty bad too. And this is where I come into with the vertical integration. We were forced to do it because of market forces around us. But at the end of the day, the bigger business ended up being the one we were forced to create to try to protect the original business. And I actually shut down the power project business in 2012 after 6 years and sold half the power stations and only kept the ones we really liked that suited retail and moved out of that business completely. So, you've got to be prepared to evolve very quickly and know your market and watch your market very well and be prepared to make bold steps to change and go with it and to try to lead it. So if we hadn't have done that, we would have been dead in the water, guaranteed. So that's probably one of the really big lessons out of it. So I guess, the other thing, I guess, when you're looking at capability, we added a financial partner originally. I mentioned that early on. Well, we got rid of that real early, and a lot of you entrepreneurs have to bring money in to do things, and you have to do that, but you've got to be careful on how you do it. So very early in the piece, we basically, our financial partner was restricting our movement and our development, right? And they started to try to control us, so we had to have a divorce, right? So what we did is we created our own banking capability, right? We said, what do you bring to the table? Money? Okay. Well, there's banks out there. So let's do some financial engineering. So we built our own, just got a small team together and essentially replaced that big financial fund with our own 2-man, 3-man team and did all of our own banking better than they ever did it. And that freed us to go and do whatever we wanted. So get in relationships with financial help, but don't let them control the core business that you're in. You're in control of that, and make sure you're prepared to take them out if you need to. That's from my experience, and that's exactly what we did. So that was just one of the learnings within the business as well. So that's ER Empower. We can come and ask a few more questions about that later. I will mention a few more things. We did keep vertically integrating. It never stopped. So we went upstream into the oil and gas, but when we didn't need to build power stations, we didn't need that one. So we actually wrote those assets off, and we lost 20 million there, right? We shut down the power project business because we didn't need to build anymore. The country didn't need it. So then we had retail business, and all our energies were in retail, but then we said, right, let's vertically integrate on this side. So the next thing is when you deliver power, you deliver to a meter, and there's metering. And then there's working with the customer to you consume better, more energy efficient, solar. There's a whole range of things you can do, demand response, so customers can turn down, and you can trade that in the market by working with them. So we vertically integrated, we created a metering business so we could control the data in our network. Because one of the reasons when we did so well in the retailing was that our billing systems were second to none, because we knew the biggest hate of all the entire industry was billing. They got these bills from these big ex-government owned corporations, and they always had errors in them. And it was always a nightmare to go back and get the things sorted. So we totally turned that on its head. If you became an ER Empower customer, you got your bill within 24 hours of the first of the month, every month, with 0 errors, ever. We actually didn't have any errors, which is remarkable. And we worked so hard to get that level of accuracy because we knew that was the biggest hate, that they couldn't trust the supplier. But with our bill, they could trust it every single time because there was never, ever an error. And what that meant is a couple of things. Is not only we billed them on the second day, I guess first or second day, we incentivated them to pay us quickly. So we actually billed them, and we had collected 80% of our money in 14 days, right? Before our competitors even got their bills out in 30 days. So we'd billed and received all the money before they even got their really poor quality bills out. So customer service played an absolute key, and attacking the Achilles heel of your competitor was a big factor, understanding what the customers wanted and what they didn't like the most, and really addressing that. So that was a really big learning of ER Empower as well. But yeah, so we kept on integrating, and then we grew that business so much in Australia, we're sort of getting to 25% market share, and we thought, you know, that's getting to a saturation point. Where's the growth going to come to from there? So then we went and bought a small one in America and started growing that business rapidly in America. So it went to America, and that was the last thing I did before I left, was buy that American business to keep the growth going. Unfortunately, they didn't succeed, right? So they ended up selling it, probably for what they paid for it. They didn't lose much money on it, I don't believe, but they didn't get it to really... They grew very quickly, but they didn't grow profits very quickly, so which was disappointing. I was hoping they were going to take what we did in Australia and do it in America, but they didn't do that. But that's okay. That's life. So anyway, so that's the ER Empower story. So hopefully you get a bit of a feel for some of the, I guess the key drivers of the vertical integration was ambition. We wanted to succeed badly. We had to survive. We were getting under huge threat from a vertically integrating sector. So we had to go with it and dominate it, so to survive. And we had to pull some serious X factors out of the hat here. Because if you're a BHP, you don't go and buy power from a new startup. Power's too damn important for you. If you lose power supply, your whole cost structure can change overnight in your business. Power's pretty important for hospitals, you know. So big business do not lightly make their decisions about it. So we needed some big X factors to break into the market. So when you're looking at vertical integration, look for the opportunities, but also you've got to bring some X factors to change the status quo, however it's being served today. you've got to bring something new to it that can't be ignored, and something where they have to give you a go, or they're crazy not to give you a go. So that's, you've got to bring that to it, and if you can get those ingredients together, bang, you've got a real opportunity to go for it. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to Novonix, which is a company which I say is sort of a lot earlier on its stage of development. I would say it's about 10%, if that, along its stage of development. So I left ERM Power in 2014, took nearly a year off to recharge the batteries, and I got invited to come back in to do a feasibility study, be the managing director, part-time managing director of this little exploring company in Queensland, to do a feasibility of doing a graphite mine development in North Queensland, to hopefully extract graphite out of the ground and sell it into the growing battery market for the electric, to feed the electric vehicle market. So that was the idea. So I was getting a bit bored by this time, and I'd done the boat thing, I'd done, the things that you do to try to chill out, and I was ready to get back into it. So I said, yeah, I'll give it a go. Why not? So I went up to Cloncurry and we walked around, and I could see the graphite coming out of the ground. That all looked pretty good, and it was pretty high quality. So, well, that's good. The metallurgist is saying it's good. So then it was, well, how deep is this? How big is this resource? So I agreed to pay for the drilling program so long as I get 10% or 15% of the company. I'll put in a couple of $100,000. I'll pay for that drilling program, and I'll do the feasibility. So that's the deal. So, all right, that's the deal. So we did it, and guess what? It was deep. It was big. It was brilliant. So we were off and running. We did a listing on the stock exchange, raised $3 million to then do a more detailed feasibility, and really take this project to being developed. So in the middle of this, what I did is said, well, I need to understand this market, right? It's not like copper or gold or silver where you can just look up the price and all that sort of stuff. Graphite doesn't trade on any exchange. It's very opaque market. You don't hardly even know who makes it around the world. It's really difficult to understand. So I quickly understood that, Jesus, my biggest job here is to study the shit out of this market, to know what the hell we're getting into. Because if we go ahead with this, I'm going to be pumping my money into it, and I want to make sure I'm confident that it's going to get there. So I probably spent 80% of my time on the feasibility on the market, travelling to China, travelling to the US, travelling all around the world to customers in Japan and Korea to understand the market from the battery maker all the way through to the processors and the leaders in the various segments, all the way down to battery materials being extracted out of the ground. And there's a long way from, it's a big supply chain to go from materials out of the ground all the way through to electric car. But I had to understand that whole supply chain. And I found out some really bad things, which meant that this is not a good idea. Firstly, graphite was 80-90% controlled by China. They have huge reserves there and surplus capacity which they can switch on and off and muck with the whole global market. And they've done this, you can see it. And it's actually, when you extract it out of the ground and make a concentrate out of it, it's a long way away from being suitable to go into a battery. Everyone talks about this graphite mining as if it's ready to go in a battery. But there's so many processes you've got to do. And when I analysed that whole process about getting raw materials out to what goes in a battery, the concentrate sold for about 50 cents a kilo, the stuff that we're going to mine up in Cloncurry, versus the stuff that's sold to go into the battery sold for $10 or $20 a kilo. So what do I want to do that for? I want to do that. That's where the money is, the value is in the advanced manufacturing here, not in the extraction stuff down there. And it's controlled by China, which I can't control, and it's just too much risk. So that was pretty bad news for someone who just put a couple $100,000 into a drilling program there. But through my work and my study and the research, I found opportunity. Right, so in America, I found a R&D company, and this was from my outreach to automotive organisations. So one of the automotives said, go and see this guy in America. If he likes your materials, we'll talk to you. I said, oh God, he must be pretty good. So I went and talked to this bloke in America. And he was very good at what he did. He had a small lab, and a lot of automators were sending people to him to test their materials to say if it was any good or not. Anyway, so I camped with this guy for about a week. I said, I'm going to learn everything I know off this dude right here. So I spent a lot of time with him. And at the end of the week, I wanted to buy his business, right? Because I found out some very interesting things. One of them was that synthetic graphite outperformed natural graphite in lifetime. When you put it into a battery, it means the battery will last 2, 3, 4 times as long if you use synthetic versus natural. And what do I have? A natural graphite deposit. So that's really bad. The other thing is he worked out a way to make a really good quality synthetic graphite at lab scale using a new technique. Well, I like that a lot, right? So I said, well, I want to buy that. I want to buy this. Let's do it together. We'll fund this and we'll try to commercialize this. And he agreed, which was pretty cool. And then the other thing I did early on is I negotiated an ability to buy him out completely down the track, which I ended up doing. I'm glad I did that way back there for a set price. But the other thing I did is I wanted to find out how come this guy in America has been successful in developing this material. He's not a 3M organisation. He's not a Dow Chemical. He's just a little Joe Blow science organisation. And he said, well, it's this technology in Canada called ultra high precision coulometry. And he said, it's only new to the market, and my professor invented it. And basically what I've been able to do is I build a material, I put it in a battery, and I test this battery, and on each charge and discharge, it tells me what the permanent loss is. So if I put X number of electrons in, and I extract X number of electrons, right, how many do I get back? Do I get them all back? So if you get all the electrons back, it's a perfect battery, it'll last forever. So no batteries are perfect. So there's a little loss. And if it's a really good battery, it'll be really little. So anyway, this company designed us, there was no instrumentation in the world that could measure such a small amount. So they developed it. So what it allowed him to do is build a battery and cycle it about 20 times and be able to plot the degradation or the loss of energy. And then he was able to extrapolate that. So whereas everyone else in the world was building the battery and putting them on these old cyclers, like the old IKEA thing, to work out how long it lasts, well, that takes a year. And then it says, guess what, that design's shit, or that material's shit, go start again. They had to wait a year for that answer. But this dude was getting the answer in a month. So his R&D cycle time was 10 times faster. So I'm glad I really analysed how he did it, because then I went and bought that company. Right? Because that is the enabling technology to allow him to develop these really great materials really fast. And that was another little company, so we bought that. And the whole idea was, well, one, I need to keep improving this material, so it's always the best. But if it does that for anode, why doesn't it do it for cathode? Why doesn't it do it for electrolyte? This same technology can be applied to all the materials in the battery. So that was the idea. Buy that company, make sure it helps this one be successful with the anode materials, but then leverage the talent to use that technology to build the greatest cathode materials, electrolyte materials, etc. So that's really what Novonix is doing today. It's a battery technology company that's also a battery materials company. It uses this technology to make better materials. And it uses this technology to make better manufacturing processes. So not only designing a better particle, but designing a more efficient or cost-effective way to make that particle. So we'll change the process parameters or the process methods and make a particle that's unique, and then we'll test it in the battery. Very quickly, in a month, we'll know whether that little change was good or not. So we're just tweaking manufacturing process as well as final design of the product. So within 2 years of investment, we got our product to commercial stage and we pushed it out into the market. And in December last year, we announced our first foundational contract with Samsung, which is one of the top 5 battery makers in the world. They loved our material. And they said, right, you're a startup though. So how many tonnes can you produce next year? We said 500. We're going to commit to build 500 tonne capacity. They said, we'll take 500 tonnes. And if you do good at that, then we'll expand it. So they currently consume 20,000 tonnes, and they're going to 100,000 tonnes over the next 5 years. Now they're about number 5 on the ladder. So if you go to the top guy, which is Panasonic, they're currently using about 40,000 tonnes of the material, 30,000 already being used in the Gigafactory in Nevada, feeding Tesla. So Panasonic make the batteries for the Tesla motor vehicle. They use 30,000 tonnes of the material. So in January, we signed an MOU with Panasonic Sanyo. They love our material as well, but they got to test the shit out of it. So it took Samsung a year to test our material to get happy. Panasonic have done phase 1 of testing, they're moving to phase 2. So this is just the anode materials. So, we don't need a lot of customers. Just those 2 will be fine. But the other 3 of the top 5 are waiting to test our materials, right? So we will eventually roll it out to them and see if they like it as well, and hopefully build big factories to supply these companies. And that market, of course, is growing tenfold in the next 5 years, and then another tenfold. It is going enormous. The current consumption of this product is about 200,000 tonnes, and it's going to 2 million tonnes in 10 years. So, and there's not many companies that can make this material. It's really hard to make. So it's exciting business. Then the other part of it is the cathode and the electrolyte. So we've just announced some new innovative cathode materials that we've built, and some new manufacturing methods, which are totally out of the box and new, that potentially can change the way in which cathodes are made. So these are inventions that we've filed patents on that are at lab scale, and we're now investing over the next, like we did on the anode side, we're investing over the next 2 years to take them from making grams to making kilos, and then hopefully to making tonnes. And that won't be easy to be able to do that. But that's the opportunity that's presented on that side. So it's a business, I see that as our incubation business to do more and more. So yeah, quite different. Again, when you go back to some of the, it's not like it's vertically integrated. I guess it was with extraction from mining, and I end up buying a business that tests the battery product way down there, because it tells me whether that material is any good, right? So I went to both ends of this whole supply chain. But we have to focus on what parts of the supply chain you're well suited for. So we're not going to get into battery manufacturing. That is the big guys with hundreds of billions of dollars, whatever. That's what's needed there. And it's low margin activity as well. But in the battery materials area, it's lent itself to a smaller company that can grow big, but starting small. So our first factory cost about 20 million to get going. That's nothing. That's a small number in the scheme of what we can do with this business. So that was a really good element to it. But yeah, again, it was some of those common themes, I think, around obviously ambition to get something out of this and have a success, and really not just giving up when we hit our first roadblock, but finding new ways. Survival. Well, all that bad news about that graphite that's still in the ground north of Cloncurry, there's a lot of bad news there. So I was thinking, how am I going to survive this company? I've just listed on the stock exchange, and in less than 12 months had to go back and say, hey, investors, we're not, well, I didn't say it exactly like this, we're not mining anymore. We're going to put the mining on hold because I've got a whole better proposition. We're going to go and buy technology, and here's why. Thankfully, they didn't all jump off the ship. They stuck with it, and in fact, I raised $15 million to do that pivot. From $3 million to go do a mining thing, I cut it off at about $1 million spend and said, let's just put that over there. If there's a war and China doesn't supply graphite, then that might be interesting, but we'll just park it over there, and that's almost happening. But we're going to go focus on synthetic over here. So there was a lot of, I guess, survival factor driving the need to pivot and change and look at that whole supply chain. But, it goes back to me, I would have made a terrible mistake for myself and investors if I hadn't have done that homework on looking at that whole supply chain I would have probably been investing in a graphite mine, which has probably been a failure. And I certainly wouldn't have found these wonderful opportunities that presented themselves when I was out doing my DD. So anyway, there are a couple of, they're my two stories. But as I said, Novonix, I hope, touch wood, it becomes one of the biggest battery materials companies in the world in 10 years. It's really got that sort of potential. So I'm excited. We're a big shareholder still, even though I've handed over the reins to the guy who founded that testing technology company. He's an absolute star. He's going to take it way past where I ever could. I'd had 3 years training him, and he's more than ready to take it over. So I'll be a really keen supporter and shareholder now. So, but anyway, it's a good story. Anyway, hopefully you got a bit out of that. Get you to think about your own market. What's your supply chain look like? And adjacent supply chains. You know, there's heaps of opportunities in adjacent supply chains. And what can you leverage from what you do to help you take advantage of an opportunity in other parts of your supply chain or adjacent supply chains? So really encourage you to think about that and always be prepared to pivot and move. That's I've had to do that in all of these businesses and do it boldly. So, and you will make lots of mistakes, as you all know. You're all entrepreneurs, so that's what you've got to do. All right, guys and girls, thank you very much. And all the best with all of your many businesses. I've been talking around the room. I can't believe how many businesses are represented here. I think Jared and I were saying there's probably 200 or 300 businesses in Brisbane just in this room. So anyway, nice to meet you all.
Thanks so much for that, Phil. Certainly filled in a few gaps from me just watching from the sides there, and I've learned a few more things. We've got some time for questions, so if anyone has them, we'll just pass the microphone.
I could just speak.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a question about how you gather these to acquire. So you obviously you're friends with them, whatever. So do they sign up for money, or do you sell them a bit of a journey as well to be part of the bigger thing? How quite successful at it? What was the key success?
Yeah, what got them to agree to be involved? Yeah, it was the journey. So it was not about buying them and saying goodbye. On both instances, they were absolutely essential to the success of the company. So I needed them to stay and to try to create this vision. In the case of the first lot, the scientist who had the small lab, you know, he was always thinking he'd take one of his ideas and do this. But he needed someone like myself to come along and say, let's do it. I'll get the money, you've got something, let's do it together. So for him it was, well, you take all the risk, financial risk, I'll put my sweat equity and my brain in. And he shut down his lab and dedicated it to the business. So he committed that. So, and he did really well. He when he exited, he'd made about 15 million US. So he went from a small lab to being pretty well off. So he's pretty happy. So that's been a great journey for him. And in relation to the enabling technology in Canada, well, that was my plan B, right? So if the scientist with this materials and who's using this technology up there wasn't going to play ball and go on the journey with me, I was stuck. I still wanted to do the journey. So I was actually going to buy that second company anyway and do the journey. So that was my plan B. The plan A didn't work. So, but again with them, two founders in this case, not one, they had this really good testing technology that they were selling all around the world to all the major battery makers and OEMs. Just had to have this great battery testing tech. So they had a global brand. They had sales in 15 countries and they'd been operating for 2 years. Their problem is each company only needed a small number of these machines in their labs. They didn't need lots of them, so you're never going to make a fortune out of this business. But I tell you what, every business knew that business. They all knew our company because we had the best testing technology for the products they make. Whether it's a battery maker or if it's an OEM like a car maker or even an appliance maker like Dyson and so forth, they've got to pick good batteries for their products. So they need our test equipment too. So this was really strategic acquisition. And those two guys had to go with it. So the deal with them was 50% cash, 50% equity, and leadership roles in our business. So we basically took what they were earning themselves out of this business and doubled it and said, that's your base pay. And then we'll double that again on success. And you're going to have a lot of equity because we're going to pay you half in cash and half in shares. So your financial future is completely aligned. And we're going to support you. And by the way, and I committed upfront early also to invest $2 million to expand their facility for those guys to do their own R&D on cathode. Right? So these were actually scientists out of the uni that built this machine to do science. And they just happened to build a really good machine, and then they got busy selling these great machines. But they're actually really good battery scientists. So I said, actually, that's what you love to do. And I want you to do it with your technology. So let's set a whole lab over here and we'll put $2 million in and you can work on all the other stuff and go build a couple more exciting things. And they've done that and we're already filing patents out of that side of it. Right, so that was the journey. We sort of looked at their strengths and got financial alignment, but also, a strategic vision alignment with them about an exciting future that they could really buy into. And yeah.
So you had the vision first and joined, or did you kind of come up with the vision together with them?
Look, we had the vision. So they were busy trying to manufacture this technology and sell as much as they can around the world. That was their business. And they weren't doing any of the R&D stuff because they were young guys. The guy was like 30, 29 or whatever when he started, very young guy. His partner was a bit older, but the CEO, the main driver of it, and he was, just trying to make money, make ends meet. And as you do when you're starting small enterprise, it's really tough. So he didn't have the luxury going and doing R&D and stuff like that. So they weren't thinking about this at all. But I will say they knew the guy in Tennessee that was using their technology to develop the materials. So when we came to him with the story and saying the broader company is going to develop that materials business that used your technology to develop it, so they immediately liked that because they had a linkage to it. And we want you to develop more technology materials from it. So that was sort of, hopefully that gives you a bit of insight to why it happened. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for the presentation. That was great. You mentioned something about X Factor when you were talking about ERM power, but you also mentioned attracting one of the biggest energy users as your first client. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how you did that? Because you also spoke about being a startup and having to build the credit, but you then had the X Factor and got the biggest client. So what was it that...
Exactly. And a lot of serendipity here. You got to make your own luck though, right? So, but yeah, there were a few other X factors that were required to achieve that. One of the big ones, I've mentioned obviously we built the power station so we could go and show them a big power station. That gave them comfort. But the other thing is, I said the government was selling their retail arms. And so they actually, during the course of this, they sold one to a southern company. And the southern company said, yep, we'll take all those customers. Thank you. And put all the accounts down in their department down in Victoria or New South Wales. And said, we don't need you people up in Queensland. So, and I just decided to start a retail business focused on big customers. So then I looked at this group of guys and girls who were a really talented team managing all the big customers here in Queensland who had just been told they're not needed. I said, hop up, come over. There's a new office right over here. So they just straight over. So I had an instant team that were the leaders of big customer acquisition in Queensland because of the stupidity of the guys down south who just let them go. Gave them all stock options and painted a picture of what's possible, and they went for it. So yeah, that's a pretty big X factor. If that didn't happen, I would have gone and tried to acquire. I would have had to acquire, because relationships are absolutely key. So I needed to find someone that could walk into the door of the biggest customer and be trusted at an account level, not a power station building level, at a real dealing with level. And then having all of those layers behind it were essential as well, but we needed that. And we didn't have that. So fortuitously, I was able to acquire a whole team, not just one person. It worked out very well, but that was essential, yeah.
So you mentioned that having that big resource that is now parked, you then decided to go into this other foray in the States. Where did you then manage to, having got the technology and the scientists involved, where did you go from there, knowing that it's a synthetic graphite? What problems did you have to then uncover in terms of getting the bulk that's required to actually service the clients that you're getting?
Yeah, so I think I understand your question is, what do we have to do to make it work with synthetics? Yeah. Let me just repeat it. You want to know the work we have to do to make the synthetics work?
You've got a massive deposit,
Okay, gotcha.
natural, but then you've got a synthetic, and there's a huge
And-
demand for.
Yeah, that's actually the beautiful part about it, is synthetics is made from a byproduct from the petroleum industry, right? So, and it's certain varieties. Well, so with the petroleum industry, out of the back of a refinery, they take the oil out, they take the gas out, etc. And right at the end, they're left with a black, it's almost a waste product, they call it a coke byproduct. And depending on the origins of the crude, etc., and the quality, some of that product we can use and turn it into highly valuable battery materials. So we take it's almost pure carbon, and it's amorphous. It's got no structure or anything, whereas graphite's a very layered, atomically layered structure, because all the ions in a battery are stacked between the layers. So we take that product out of the back end of a refinery. It's very special, certain supplies, and then we upgrade it to a product there. And that whole process of doing that, we re-engineered. So our process that we've come up with is different to what anyone else is doing in the market today. And we think it's a lot going to be, it's a lot cheaper. We believe we're going to be able to halve the cost of what's currently done today, and do it a lot more environmentally friendly, and do it in the United States and Europe, using feedstocks from the United States and Europe. So just high level, what we do is we obviously take that hard carbon material, we crush it, so get it down to micronize it to a very fine size. Then we individually shape the nanoparticles to a certain shape and distribution of shape profile, which is very, very variable and very critical to whether it works in a battery or not, because it all affects surface area and a whole range of things. Then we coat these particles, nanoparticles, with certain types of coatings, and then we actually have to purify this material up to an insanely high purity level. And in our case, it's 99.9999% purity. So we have to cook this material at 3,000 degrees Celsius to basically just remove anything else, disintegrate any impurity. And then we coat it again, and then it's a finished product. So there's quite a lot of interesting processes required to take the waste product out of the back of a refinery and to turn it into a product that can go into. So that product we're selling for $10. Right? I think the average price now is about $12 per kilo that you sell it for. So versus the graphite concentrate mine, 50 cents a kilo is the current price for that. So they had these small little mills, small little coating machines, small little furnaces, lab scale. Right? So the big question is, can you do it economically at bigger scale? So that was our $15 million US we pumped in to take it from the lab to making tons. So that was the big risk dollars. And fortunately, we were able to do it. It's NVX. Novonix? Yeah. Yeah, Novonix. Its ticker code is NVX. Yeah. I'm not a financial advisor. Whatever I say can't be used against me.
Thank you. Can I just ask, it seems like such a long-term game that you're in. How do you sit with terms of your own fear that somebody else, another competitor, might come into the market, or how do you ensure that you're going to be on top?
Yeah. It's a constant fear, but really you can. We decided not to do patent for the anode business, for that new process that I was talking to the gentleman there about. We manage that by trade secret, right? So if you work for Novonix, my old company, you sign up to a 5-year exclusivity after you leave. So you can't do anything in the space for 5 years. So you really got to commit to being in my company because we manage it as a trade secret. And we also demarcate. So very few people see all of the processes, right? So it's a very important part of what we do to manage that. On the up at Halifax, where we do a lot of the cathode work and new manufacturing methodologies there, because that technology is so fundamentally different to current technology, we've filed patents on that. So we've thought that we can get a baseline, it'll be worth our investment to get a baseline patent on that. So we've gone a bit of both ways. One's trade secret, one's patent. So yeah, a bit of a combination. But the other thing is moving fast. So you've absolutely got to, you can't sit around worrying about your competition, to be honest. You just got to go after it and go hard. And the other thing, I guess, is, and this comes back to X factors, and I think it's similar to Shannon's previous question, is relationships are so key with this one as well. Even though we've got great scientists, great technology, making great materials, well, for a battery maker to pick us, they first of all they have to agree to test your material, and they don't like doing that because they have to take up some of their lab space and dedicate it nearly 6 months to just testing your black powder. So unless you're somebody, they don't even give you a look in. So here we are, a new company saying, Jesus, how are we going to get Samsung or Panasonic to test our black stuff, right? So a couple of things there, our X factors. We make the best testing technology in the world. So when we turn up to Samsung and Panasonic, we took a battery with us and said, our powder's good, we know it's good. Here's a battery and it outperforms your battery. And it's using the most accurate testing equipment in the world, which you own because you bought it from us, right? I went, oh yeah, we do. So we instantly had credibility, right? Then we needed them to commit to us to trial our materials. Yeah, we like it, but let's trial it. And invest. So invest in doing that. And that's where we've loaded our board of directors with some very high-powered people that can have the gravitas and the influence to make sure that we're given a chance with the biggest companies in the world. So one of the most prominent Australian international business guys, a guy called Andrew Liveris, is on our board for that reason. Andrew was CEO and chairman of Dow Chemical for the last 10 years and just left, right? One of the biggest chemical companies in the world. So he's on our board. It was a relationship that we had outside of it through our chairman, and he really liked what we were doing. And he retired, and he's on the board of IBM, he's on the board of Saudi Aramco. So he's on our little tiddling company over here that he really likes. But pretty much any door in the world we can open, which is great. And he would only do that if he liked the product and the people, right? Because he's not going to go and use his well-earned reputation and network to open doors for something he doesn't really believe in. So we did that. So that was pretty key to that as well.
Thanks again, Phil. Unfortunately, we haven't got any more time. Guys, I hope you got something out of that. Coming up at the end of this month, we've got the Movember event down the Gold Coast, so hopefully everyone's going to go down there and have their last shave before November. And on the 4th of November, we've got Last Man Standing with Steve Bradbury, so I look forward to that. Thanks again.